Bitcoiners, hope you're loving your life. I am indeed loving my life. Quentin, good morning. We love it. Daniel, good morning, Bitcoiners. Bitcoin graffiti, it is the grand rising. And we got some coffee. We love coffee. Good morning, Familia Bitcoin. Indeed, Jose. Good morning, Ben. Good morning, New World people. I'm glad I'm on this journey with you all. Well, we're going to have a great journey this morning. Sean recommends. Hope you're doing great. Good morning, Tommy. Good morning. Reading new print issue of Bitcoin magazine, and it's another banger. Great to hear, Tommy. I can't wait to read it. Can't wait to read it. Good morning, Ben agreed. Hoddle T, Washington. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Aqualodge, coffee, sun. You're giving it away. You're giving it away. You're giving it away. Good morning, Plebantry. Indeed. Good morning, Bitcoin time. Assalamu alaikum, Muslim Bitcoiner. Just came back to the USA. Only customs and borders forget to check my blood and stool sample. All the more reason for Bitcoiners to always have an extra visa elsewhere. I agree. I got caught in Morocco during the original Trump Muslim ban, and they wouldn't let you bring laptops onto the cabin. You had to check your laptop. So, I didn't even have a box for it. It was crazy. Bummer. Friday launch. I think you're talking about the super heavy rocket, Bitcoin graffiti. I hope so, because I did see that it got cleared for launch. So should be happening. Hopefully they have good weather. We've got good weather here this morning. Total sunrise, not a cloud in the sky. Things are great. Bitcoin running equally good. Sunrise tech working, money tech working. We're good. Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. Bitcoin graffiti confirms it is the Starship launch. Can't wait. So this is the heaviest capacity rocket ever, right? The most weight that we can actually get into, the most weight we can just shoots his rocket into the sunlight. It's the most weight we can get ever. And as I understand, there's enough payload to actually start colonizing Mars or the moon or something. So it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal. Want to know what's not a big deal? Fake news for the day. What do we got? What's fake? What's the fakest news I can find? What is our Moscow time today? Well, it starts with the Rolling Stone, right? We know what the Rolling Stone is up to. Here's what they say about the new speaker. We're going to be talking about him today. We're going to be talking about the new speaker a little bit. But I just want to underline what they're saying about him today. On the Rolling Stone, the key to Mike Johnson's Christian extremism hangs outside his office. Okay, the key hangs outside of his office. The newly elected House Speaker has ties to the far-right New Apostolic Reformation, which is hell-bent on turning America into a religious state. All right, so there you go. This one's great. This comes from CNBC, all right? The Target CEO claims customers are saying a big thank you for locking up all the merchandise. So when you go into Target now in America, everything's locked up, and sometimes you even get a picture, right? So instead of the actual item, you just get a picture, and then you take the picture. Some of the pictures have frames, so they're pretty nice, right? But if someone comes and takes the frame after you, it's not going to work. They're probably going to have to figure out a thing where you take a picture of the fake picture, and then you bring your pictures to the cache. Sometimes that wouldn't work for me. I use those pictures for the notes, and sometimes they don't work, right? So sometimes if you got an iPhone, you might not be able to shop anymore with not because Apple Pay won't work, only because the iCloud update for your pictures might have problems. Who knows? So you're going to have trouble shopping. But the Target CEO is claiming that everyone's really happy. Okay, it's the headline. A big thank you. It's a big thank you for locking up the merchandise, right? So the key points in the article, if you ever want to read those things, is Target is fighting theft at its stores, in part by locking up everyday items. CEO claims customers are saying a big thank you because now it means they actually have the merchandise there. So they'd rather have it there than not there. So if you lock it up, it's there. It's perfect, right? And guess what they said? Since they've locked it in cases, some of them are just like full glass cases. So if you need a $1 toothbrush or something, you got to go, hey, come here. Can you open the door so I can get out my $1 toothbrush? And then they do it. Right? And guess what? Everything behind those cases not getting robbed anymore. Problem solved. We're good, right? This problem is more problematic, though. This comes from the Irish Daily Times, I think, right? So this is the headline today. Kids are cute, but they're not really eco-friendly, guys. You can't recycle them, right? There's a whole bunch of problems, right? And they let us know that one less baby helps the planet more than giving up meat and cars. So if you really don't want to give up your car or steaks, just send your kids to a place where kids are getting killed these days. There's a whole bunch of them, right? You can just go, hey, you want to take a trip to Israel, my child? Go, have fun, right? And that way you're going to be solving eco problems and you can keep eating your steak. Okay. So Irish Times has the answer for you. Just send your kids over there. All right. So today we're going to be talking all about trash bin Laden arguments or trash bin Laden arguments, whichever you prefer. Right? If you want to trash bin Laden's arguments, good. If you want trash bin Laden arguments, also good. You've come to the right place. So we'll start today's bin Laden reference with something that happened yesterday. Everyone commenting on bin Laden's addresses to America that he made. He made about 5 or 6 of them. I remember them all. He made them all after 9/11, right? So he made these addresses and in them had some legal or not legal, had some reasoning, right? Now, remember, never think of bin Laden as a crazy person, right? He did crazy stuff, but if you read The Looming Tower, which I recommend people read, The Looming Tower, really interesting book, written by the same fella who wrote the Going Clear hit piece that led to really the end of Scientology in America, or at least the beginning of the end of Scientology. This guy was the writer of the movie The Siege. If you remember The Siege, the movie The Siege, it was a movie set in 1990s. It came out in the 90s in New York City. It starred Bruce Willis and Denzel Washington. It was all about terrorists taking over New York City, and then the whole debate about censorship and freedom, and everything turned into America turning on itself and not becoming the country you wished it was, you hoped it was. It became a type of dictatorship. Now, what ended up happening was Lawrence Wright is the writer of this, and Lawrence Wright, when he wrote the movie, just was like, well, I don't know, I'm going to go with the Muslim terrorists, right? So he didn't really think about it. It was the 1990s. He wasn't like, oh, what am I going to do here? So he went with the Muslims. And then, of course, he got the fatwa on his head, right? The fatwa, like Salman Rushdie and these other people. They were going to kill him because he said this stuff. I think they ended up killing his co-writer. But he was like, holy shit, I'm just a writer for Hollywood movies. How did I get involved in all of this stuff? So after 9/11, he actually went to the Middle East and became friends with parts of bin Laden's family. Spent a ton of time over there, actually charted the education system. The book, The Looming Tower, really has a lot to do with the education system in Saudi Arabia in particular. Apparently what happened was, and this is what set a lot of people up for a lot of mischief and trouble going forward. Now I'm going to tie this together. At the end, we're going to be talking about education system. But remember, what happened in Gaza, what happened with bin Laden in his youth, can actually be charted all the way back to Egypt. And what happened in Egypt was when the Christians were in charge, or not even really Christians at this point, it was the British military. They had cinemas and movies, and it was becoming a sort of outpost, right? A lot of locals didn't like that. They wanted to get back to Islam. They hadn't been an Islamic country really in hundreds of years. So after the war, the beginning of the Muslim Brotherhood started in that part of Egypt. And what ended up happening was Zawahiri, who became bin Laden's co-creator of Al-Qaeda, was from that part, right? Came from a really sort of prestigious family. He was a doctor, really aristocratic family, but he was one of the first to sort of embrace this thing. And he became a relative of his became the head of radio over there. And they ended up in some of the early Nasser protests in the 60s and 70s. One of the conciliatory acts that was made was, we're going to give control of the radio and education to the Muslim Brotherhood, right? So remember that. So what ends up happening next is, as Saudi Arabia is getting rich in this whole time, the 60s and 70s, right? They actually have a almost 100% completely illiterate older generation. They don't have teachers, right? They're rich now, but they don't really have a lot of teachers. They really were the House of Saud, who, we won't, MBS, by the way, is only the first generational change we've had in the leadership of Saudi Arabia in its history, right? Ibn Saud, the man who created it in 1912, around the time of the US dollar, or even a little bit earlier, had 50-something kids, right? So all of his kids took turns being the leader of Saudi Arabia, and that only stopped a few years ago. MBS is the first grandkid because he had so many children. There was no generational change. It could be charted right back to Ibn himself. So what ends up happening is the Saudis don't actually have the human capital to create an education system in their country, but they have the money and they have obviously the will, right? They don't want to stay desert people who found some oil, right? So yeah, let's get the education going. They have to go to Egypt, and they hire the same Egyptians that were hired from the Muslim Brotherhood pact that they made at that time, right? So suddenly, and bin Laden is very happy with this, and bin Laden is actually raised then educationally by those people, right? So now I mentioned all of this: education, radio, communications, all that stuff, because it's important. We're going to get to why it's important in a second. But here's what happened. So yesterday, the letters, and in the book, you get a sense of bin Laden almost being what a Christian would recognize as a very devout, almost humble Christian. Like, that's the sense you get of bin Laden when you read the book, right? That's why I'm mentioning this stuff. So, and that sort of comes out as well, right? That he knew what he was doing. It was all very rational. None of it was like, I hate America. It was none of the picture you got painted of him was nothing like that, right? This was a very pensive, sort of low time preference kind of guy, right? Criticized his father heavily about too many women, right? He was not going to be like that. They really looked a lot like what you would think of as Christian revival from the 60s and 70s and 80s in America. It looked a lot like that, right? So, so there he is. He writes this letter, and he wrote a few of them. Now, the one that went crazy yesterday, right, was one where he talked about U.S. finance, follow the money, and American complicit responsibility in American actions. Now, before 9/11, just before 9/11, I was working in a factory with a bunch of Eastern Europeans who are all obviously anti-Semites, right? Very, very popular anti-Semitic strain that runs through Eastern Europeans. So they're the people. I'd never really heard of the bank cartels or anything like that before, right? But these guys were like, yeah, that America is going to be supplanted. You know the philosophy already from the communists was that eventually America would meet the same fate as the Soviet Union, and that America would be taken down, right? That was already before 9/11 what a lot of Eastern Europeans said was in the cards for America, that it would be supplanted by a regenerated Africa or something like that, or China or something like that, right? So this was sort of an idea that they had and were pretty wedded to at the time. And they said one of the reasons why it's going to be there and is because of this Israel-America thing, right? That eventually America would have to pay a price for its foreign policy support of Israel to the extent that it was. So this was before 9/11. When 9/11 happened, my first instinct, right, because I actually weirdly saw the plane hit the thing just by chance. I had a broken watch and had to go pick it up that day. And when I left, when I woke up in the morning, I had to turn the television on in my bedroom in order to know what time it was, because I didn't have a watch, right? So I was like, turn the TV on. I saw it live, right? The second impact. My first instinct as things were happening before the towers fell was, this will probably provoke a big conversation, a probably necessary conversation in U.S. foreign policy and involvement and stuff. Now, I believe that And I was right with that until you started seeing the first people jump out of the buildings, and then the buildings collapse. And then you realize what the death toll was. And you're like, wait a minute. Nothing justifies this. Nothing, right? There is no like intellectual thing that comes out of this that's beneficial. This was just straight up murder of people, right? Straight up murder. Now, doesn't change the logic that he applied, right? So I'm telling you my personal experience, and I'll tell you, because we're going to be talking about Israel, we're going to be talking about Candace and everything that happened yesterday, right? Here's what the conclusion I came to. And you got to remember, I went to Israel not long after this too, right? So I'll tell you again, I love Israel, love it, right? Love it. It's one of the greatest places. I am a huge fan. It's an amazing place, right? I'll never stop loving it. I'll never stop wanting to support it and wanting to see it do well. However, and that's what we're going to talk about now. It's not that simple, right? So first of all, one of the amazing things I learned in Israel, and this is true, right, is that for every 2 Israelis, you have 3 opinions, right? They're just a fighty bunch. You have 30 political parties in Israel. Do you know they've never had an actual elected majority government? Never in their entire history. They have to always create coalitions. And they've, like I said, got about 30 parties that they can be represented at any one time in the Knesset, right? So the Knesset being their parliament. So we'll get into the Israel stuff. But let's start with just the letter. So the letter's logic, right, is that because USA funds the bombs that kill the Mujahideen and all these stuff, well, then the American taxpayer is also responsible, right? Kind of an intellectual argument and puts responsibility on U.S. taxpayers for not asking enough questions about their government. Maybe a fair criticism, maybe. So the letter yesterday that went all over the place, right? Now, one of the things, and this is what Cernovich said about it, right? He says, there's a paragraph in Osama bin Laden's letter to America where he justifies killing civilians because we voted for the government, hence we deserve terrorism. His rhetoric is indispensable from arguments people are making today regarding Hamas and the Palestinians. It's exactly the same thing, right? When people say, well, you know, Hamas has, they're 90% terrorists. They might be. We don't know the percentage. I wish someone would talk about the percentages. Like, what does it mean that there are that many that voted for Hamas and that many that didn't? We don't know. We're never given any details. No one even discusses this, right? So we don't know. But him pointing that out is important, right? So now, because this letter went sort of viral yesterday, everyone bringing it up saying, wait a minute, the bin Laden argument is now being used by Americans and Zionists, right? So Glenn Greenwald picks up on that and he says, ever since October 7, we've been urging people to recall the lessons of 9/11, not just US's huge errors responding, but why it happened. Bin Laden's letter blaming U.S. violence in their region, including U.S. support for Israel, went viral on TikTok. So The Guardian actually deleted it yesterday. So now you can't even get the Bin Laden letter anymore, right? Same thing happened with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Everyone was forced to pretend the conflict began on February 24th, 2022. So no discussion of what came before or what the U.S. NATO did. And now the same thing with the Hamas attack. Everything was fine. It all started on October 7th. Still, watching The Guardian delete a vital historic document that young people who didn't live through 9/11 just found because it provides too much information that Western elites don't want their populations to have is utterly chilling. But it happened here, right? So, ACLU obviously involved, right? All of this stuff, right? So now we've got the debate changing ground very quickly on the Israeli USA thing, right? And all of that sort of came to a head yesterday, and America's involvement with that thing is starting to shift. We've talked a lot about how this conflict is shifting Democrat allegiances, Democrat alliances. It's doing the same with Republicans, which I think is great for us, right? So I'll explain. So yesterday, 2 things happened. There was this video that went around, right? It's what they're calling the Roscoe, what do they call it? The Roscoe, this is what Jack Posobiec has been calling it. The Roscoe, let me find it. Yeah, here it is, the Roscoe trope, right? It's the Roscoe trope. And this comes from Gadsat, who I'm inviting to Bitcoin 2024. I think he's great. I think he needs Bitcoin right now in his own worldview. I met him recently at a Dairy Queen in Montreal and was able to invite him. I hope he comes. So this is this Roscoe trope that, I guess white Christians aren't enough into Israel or something like that, right? Or that they're now the problem because their allegiance is turning. So the Anti-Defamation League created an advertisement yesterday, right? The Anti-Defamation League that's gone after pretty much everyone under the sun, right? Elon Musk, anyone who criticizes Israel in any way gets thrown under the bus with these folks. So they make an advertisement yesterday, and it's a father and son, or it's a few days ago. It's a father and son. Unfortunately, I got to tell you about their race because that's the point of the story, because it's 2024 and people are stupider than ever, right? So it's a typical white dad and a typical white kid. And the dad drives his son and, it's kind of raining out. And he says to his son, I saw what you've been posting online. Hitler was right. I never taught you anything like that, And then he goes, well, you go tell them to their face. And he brought them to a synagogue, and you see these, beautiful, nice Jewish families. And now the kid's got to go out there and sort of explain what he did, right? Fine. Nothing wrong at all with the article. Zero, right? The advertisement is fine. The message is fine. I don't have a problem with it. But what people do have a problem with, and I think this is entirely correct, is why would the ADL target white people for this message when it's not really white Christians doing this stuff, right? Like they're not real. If anything, more white Christians are frustrated by the unanimous consent of Israel's support, but not what you're seeing here. Now, it exists. I don't want to say that there aren't any, not even Christians, just white Americans that hate Israel. Of course there are. Of course there are anti-Semites. 100%, right? I wouldn't deny that ever. Of course, 150%. But now a lot of people picking up on this, right? So here's Max Mayer: the propensity to blame anti-Semitism on American whites, the most philo-Semitic group of people in modern history of the world, is extremely upsetting. Right. So these are the same people that have gone after Elon Musk. And of course, Elon comes in yesterday and says, back someone up who was criticizing this article. Right. So someone comes in and criticizes the article, a very low followed account. And what does he say? He says, this person comes in and says, okay, Jewish communities have been pushing this exact kind of dialectical hatred against white people that they claim to want people to stop using against them. I'm deeply disinterested in giving the tiniest shit about how Western Jewish populations coming to this disturbing conclusion would feel about it. And Elon says, you have said the actual truth. So this was to a no-name account. And he came and said, you're right. This is true. This advertisement is disgusting, right? And Elon cleared it up because everyone was saying, now Elon has finally shown his face. He is an anti-Semite. He's finally proving it. He hates Jewish people. And so he says here, the ADL unjustly attacks the majority of the West, despite the majority of the West supporting the Jewish people. This is because they cannot, by their own tenets, criticize the minority groups who are their primary threat. It is not right, and it needs to stop, right? So this is, again, everything that Elon went through with Greenblatt and all that stuff, and then they were going to run the boycott of sponsors on Twitter, but he fought against that. But it's the same thing again. It just has resurfaced, right? And you see it again. Cernovich saying, like clockwork, the attention turned to Elon for replying to a larger conversation and not contextualizing it. It was obvious that the point was anything to ignore Hamas inside CNN's tent. There's violence happening, but that would be blamed on Democrats. Change the discussion, right? So people picking up, of course, Jake Tapper, the CNN fake news guy, comes in and says, same thing, right? Look, he's finally showed he's a complete racist. Oh my God, right? And Wall Street Silver says, the ADL is trapped by the political box they've put themselves into. As a far left-wing arm of the Democrat Party, the ADL is not allowed to call out the real threats to Jews because the Islamists are part of the Democratic coalition. The ADL must therefore invent fake targets to justify its existence to donors. So a lot of people picking up on this today. Now, you can disagree with me, right? I'm not sure I have the exact answer on here, but it looks like that's what's going on, right? I think Cernovich had one more thing about Jake Tapper that I wanted to read. No, I think I don't have it. That's okay. I copied a few things twice here, unfortunately. So anyway, doesn't matter. The point here is that indeed the ADL has been creating this thing of the same type of group persecution they're experiencing. They're almost perpetuating it, right? So why can't you criticize that, right? Now go further, right? Yesterday, Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro got into a huge fight about this exact stuff, right? She's been critical of Israel. Ben Shapiro, and she wrote a scripture, or tweeted out something from scripture about blessed be the peacemakers. I don't know exactly which one. I don't think I have the whole quote here. But somewhere in it, Ben Shapiro believed she was talking about money, right? And not taking his money and working for her because they disagree. So they started to fight online, and she came out, or he came out and said, if you want to quit, just quit, right? We don't need you here. And she says, look, I'm just quoting scripture because I'm going through something right now and it's not easy, and da da da. So he tells her to quit. But lucky, somehow, she gets this Tucker Carlson interview the same day. And the whole point is to talk about Ben Shapiro on the show. So while they're fighting in real time, she comes out and goes on Tucker Carlson's show, right? So first of all, they make this thing where she goes after him on the vaccines, Ben Shapiro, right? He was pro-COVID vaccine, and we were all idiots for not getting the vaccine. Tucker says, so he was on the left on the three biggest issues of our time, just talking about censorship and a few other things, right? But here's the most important part of it, right? So, well, let's just say this as well, too. And I will say this about Ben Shapiro and almost any Jewish person when it comes to what's going on in Israel. It was so bad what happened on October 7th that I don't even, whatever opinion someone who is connected to that wants to have, I don't fault them. There is almost a let's call it DNA trauma that's going on for generations. And what happened on October 7th was so bad that I don't care what any Israeli or Jewish person wants to do about it. I'm not going to argue with them. Like, they're free to make that choice, and I'm okay with that, right? I'm not telling them, oh, you gotta calm it down, right? I don't care. Like, they can go as crazy as they want, right? But here's where they're losing the plot, and Cernovich says it. He goes, Ben Shapiro created a large company that pays people who would be forced to work elsewhere in media or not at all. And judging by Crowder leaked contract, he pays well. He's still losing the plot a bit here. Happens to us all. So that's kind of where I'm at with Ben, right? But that's not where I'm at on all of these questions. And this is the important part. And again, Cernovich is just killing it today, right? So many spicy takes today that it's amazing. So here's what he said about Israel and all that stuff, because it's amazing, right? If you put the Elon thing in context, if you put the fight yesterday with her in context, he says the following. My notes for some reason doubled up today. Here's what it is, right? I have all the same files twice, so I'm having to go through everything a little more. Stupid, crappy thing again, right? Well, what he said was, I got to get the right quote because it was so good. It was too good. Well, the point is, he said something along the lines of, I gotta find it. How did I not even get it? Yeah, here it is. Here it is. It blows my mind how we Americans aren't supposed to have the debates about Israel that Israelis have. And that's everything right there. That's the whole point. That's why I had to get this one, right? If you ever bother to read Israeli media, you'll see they sound a bit more interested and nuanced than our favorite 2003 Iraq war supporting talk show and Fox News hosts. And that's exactly everything right there, right? And this is something that Ben Shapiro, I don't think, is giving Candace Owens the leeway to talk about, right? Indeed, American opinions about Hamas and Palestine and Israel and all that stuff are so messed up with all of the brainwashing that it turns into these binaries, these huge contrasts, instead of the nuanced position that most Israelis have. Like I said at the start, one of the things I learned, and I spent time in the Knesset, I spent time in the Supreme Court, I went all over the country, I even went to the West Bank and spent time there with PLO people. You were not allowed to meet Gaza people. Gaza was already turned over by then. So all of this stuff was going on, and my impression was, holy cow, indeed, the joke of every two Jews gives three opinions is true, right? And I'll even tell you a joke that my guide kept telling us when we were there. Every different hotel we'd stay at, right? He'd say, okay, we'd get to the hotel. He said, okay, we're going to meet here at 5 o'clock and go for dinner. We'll meet in the lobby, but be careful. It's a Jewish lobby. But they were cool, man. I got to go to, like I said, I met PLO people. We went to the West Bank and met those people. Went to their parliament or whatever the hell it is, real shithole. But indeed, how did Americans get corralled into these two extremes? It's the brainwashing. It's why I said again that if you try to get involved in the world of Israel and Palestine today, and you have like an intellectual opinion, don't bother. The intellectual opinions are just pushed by this fucked up incentive structure that now has forced us into the most fiat of all wars, which is no matter what side you approach. Like anyone out there telling you, oh, the genocide people are on that side, right? No, Israel's worse. No, they're terrible because the incentive structures are so screwed up. You can't actually figure out what's going on. There's no way. Because you can't understand the money, you can't understand what's going on with this military contractor and this military contractor. And here's like one of the best ways I've ever found to put it, right, of what's going on there. So I was on the Sea of Galilee one night there, and there was a Montreal, Montreal's a very Jewish city, by the way. I grew up around a lot of Jewish people, and that's kind of how I got involved in all of this stuff. Montreal's a lot like New York City and its demographics besides the French part. So I'm there on the Sea of Galilee with a Montrealer who moved to Israel and emigrated and is now an Israeli and all that. And he was just there to hang out with us and show us around. But of course, he brought a bit of hash, right? So we're smoking some hash on the, it's a lake. And he goes, oh, it's really good Afghani stuff, right? And this is 2008. So this is like right in the thick of it all. And I say, Afghani, what are you supporting terrorist hash makers for? And he goes, well, a Jew made money somewhere. And he's puffing, and that's it, right? That's it. That's what's going on. But here's where things get good, right? Here's where things get good. Just as I said, the Israeli Hamas thing, because of these fiat incentive structures, have now led us to absolutely estranged from reality ideas, right? Because we followed this Bin Laden argument now. We're all Bin Laden. We're on Bin Laden's timeline. Everything Bin Laden predicted is here, right? We're doing as Bin Laden predicted we would and as he did in his time, which to me is a symbol that the momentum that brought the Bin Laden thing here has now led us to this dead end. We're at a dead end. It doesn't go further than this. I don't think Bin Laden saw further than this. This is what he saw, right? He saw America forcing Patriot Act type things, America forcing censorship into its people, brainwashing people much more than they were before in order to come and get to these extremes. In some ways, he was an accelerationist, right? Now, again, his idea is insane, that a group of people should be responsible for brainwashing and reality distortion, which is what the US dollar had done, right? So just look at what's happening now, though, with the realignment, right? We see it with Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro, right? Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro. Who knows what'll happen today, but at least you're able to have the conversation now, and at least things are changing, right? So she came on the show, she talked about Thomas Sowell, she talked about America, why America has to get out of this fight, right? And get out of getting divided and falling into line with these things. And you see it everywhere, right? Now, go back to the speaker, right? The speaker who I mentioned in one of the first ones around this stuff, right? So he was on stage yesterday with Schumer and all these Democrats. Looks like they voted to fund the government for the next year. They're going to fund as well. The Republicans are funding all of the Gestapo, FBI stuff that are going against January 6 people, right? So that's all funded. So that's all good to go, right? It's all good to go, right? Cernovich here also saying, not interested in anyone who supports Israel who won't explain why they sold drones to Azerbaijan used to kill American Christians, Armenian Christians. Either you don't know this, and I do check for receipts, in which case you don't know anything, or you do know but are willing to make an exception, right? And indeed, if you go to Israel, Israelis are talking about why they're selling these drones to the Azerbaijanis to kill Armenians. They're asking about it. Why can't we? Why can't we taxpayers ask about it, right? Israelis are asking about it. And again, what Cernovich said, why can't we have these conversations? So how did that happen, right? Now, the realignment you can even see, right? Go back to yesterday. And so the Hamas people actually went and tried to destroy and break into the Democrat National Convention building in DC, right? And of course, John Levine says, insurrections are good now. We're back on the BLM rules, because, you know, it was like one of those things, right? Then at the same time, right, you've got now Nikki Haley, who everyone says is the big uniparty forever war candidate now. And now she's saying she's going with the Hillary Clinton stuff, right? That Vivek is just anti-woman. He's got a woman problem, right? He's got a woman problem. He's criticizing the Ronna McDaniels thing as a woman problem, right? So Nikki Haley is acting exactly like a Democrat. I mean, she can't ever be a Republican president, but she's acting exactly like a Democrat. She wants the censorship, right? She's talking about the censorship yesterday. So look at the realignment here, right? It's Nikki Haley, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, and Elon Musk, but it gets better, right? It's not just them. You've got Eric Adams in New York City, right? So Eric Adams is in New York. And remember what happened to Eric Adams, right? He started saying that actually it's not just the anti-Islam stuff we got to worry about. It's also the anti-Israel stuff. It's also criticism of Israel. We have to be able to criticize everyone and help everyone, right? Taking sort of a typical American approach that you would hear in most instances. But right away when he said that, and right away when he started criticizing open borders, what happened to Eric Adams, the Democrat mayor of New York? Well, he got investigated, right? He had his campaign manager broken into. He had the FBI come to his house and take all of his computers, right? Looking for campaign finance stuff. So we get Eric Adams, who gets into all this trouble. And geez, my notes suck shit today. Don't know how this happened. Yeah, so we get Eric Adams, who has this trouble, right? And then you get Jesse Kelly, who says the following thing about, this guy getting out of jail, or this Eric Adams getting out of trouble. And he says, Trump will be in prison or confined to his home in 2024. You don't think so because you're in love, and love gives you blinders. You don't have any idea what kind of country you live in now. 2024 will be extra brutal. And this is a person who's just sort of trying to support Trump, right? And this is Cernovich again. The Republican House Speaker was holding hands with Schumer, who would put every Trump voter into a gulag after giving Democrats in the Senate their spending wish list. We don't get the wall, though. Great job, guys. Glad you pushed out the top fundraiser of all time. I think he's talking about. McCarthy. Let me get the. Let me just get this one other quote that I need about Eric Adams and the trouble he's in, because again, it shows the how much things are changing and how important these changes are. Let me see. Don't know why my notes suck so bad today. Yeah, here we go. This is the one I wanted. This is the wrong Jesse Kelly one. So here's what Eric Adams, right? Eric Adams, like about 99% of Americans, just didn't realize what kind of country he lives in now. So this is the same thing as the guy who says, oh, Trump's going to win in 2024. It's going to solve everything, right? And he says, you don't even understand the country you live in and how bad it is, right? Eric Adams, like about 99% of Americans, just didn't realize what kind of country he lives in now. People, they thought Project Veritas had a diary that made Joe Biden look bad, and they sent the freaking FBI to kick down their door. Better wake up, right? And indeed, this whole thing about Israel and give them $1, and look, again, morally, I don't care what Israel does to its neighbors. I don't care. I don't care about the history. What they went through on October 7th, get them. Get them. I don't give a shit, right? It's so bad that I have a lot of tolerance for what they do. However, I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to be involved in paying for it. Why do they need the money? Why can't we even ask about the money? How come? What's going on here? Why can't you ask about the money, right? Now, again, I support Israel because they're not going to kill me, right? If I go to Israel and I just do my thing, life is great. I can't go do that in Egypt so easily, right? I can't go in a lot of places and be fine as I am. I can hide and I can go to, Egypt and sort of not make trouble, right? That's fine. I'm pretty sure I can get away with that. But I can't just go and be the way I would be in Israel, right? So Israel's not coming to get me, right? So that's it. That's my whole reason why I would support them, right? Inevitably, they need a revolution inside of the Islamic world to make it more peaceful. And I think it's going to happen. I'm very bullish on Islam's ability to get this done. You're already seeing the king of Saudi Arabia talking about how proselytization and their outreach is the same as jihad, that jihad should be a form of evangelism and conversion and letting people know about Islam. And I think he's going to get away with it. I think he's going to reform the religion. If you go right back to what I was saying originally about the education system in that country and how much it changed, but they have the capacity now. It's not the same period where there was only the Muslim Brotherhood you could hire to be your teachers, right? It's not even close to that anymore. So I think that the next generation of Saudis will have a much better education than the one bin Laden got, which was created by the Muslim Brotherhood and was entirely 100%, led to the thing we have today. So the education system is big here. And again, I don't think, like, for example, Hamas is going to be educating the kids anymore in Gaza. That's over, right? Israel has taken it. It's not going to happen. So I'm for that, right? I'm for the education getting better over there and not teaching people to kill other people from childhood on. That would be great, right? That's a sign of progress. So all that to say, I would have gone into some of the Iran stuff. I think I'm going to skip that for today. Anyway, the point is, Democrat, Republican parties are getting melted by this Middle East issue. They're getting reconfigured. The whole thing is getting changed. And what it looks like we're getting out of it all is an ability to actually follow the money and not get distracted, not get diverted, not get confused. And if that happens and we get the realignment that we've been predicting for a while, right? We get the realignment not from red and blue and conservative and liberal, all those fake dichotomies, right? That are just constantly created in order to keep people opposed. Once you're able to follow the money a little more, once you're able to understand the censorship and brainwashing and its connection to policies, you'll understand everything a lot better. And people are waking up to that these aren't really heartfelt opinions. These are just profit motives and everything that you would imagine. It's as boring as it sounds and as stupid as it sounds. And so the and you can even see it here. Remember everything we just said about Nikki Haley, right? This is an actual Axios headline that should have been in the fake news today, but my notes suck. But imagine, they call it a scoop, okay? A scoop. Now remember, the whole point now is to understand following the money lets you know about incentives, that economics are way more important than politics. In fact, I don't even think the world politics will exist going forward in a sense that we'll understand it to be economics first. Macroeconomics are just politics. They're just politics. And Candace Owens, in the interview with Tucker Carlson yesterday, said that exact thing. She says, I'm not really getting in, I'm getting out of political opinions and this and that. She said, I'm starting to see through reading Thomas Sowell that everything is about economics and incentives, and that can explain psychology much better and the economy much better than anything else. And if you understand the incentives, you'll understand the motivations, you'll understand censorship, you'll understand why these fictitious opinions are being manifested and conjured and created and being used to hypnotize people, and why would you hypnotize someone, and all of those things, right? So this is an actual headline in Axios today, like an actual headline. Should have been in Moscow time. It's got 1 million views, right? But here you go. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon has been talking privately with GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley about the global economy and believes she has the potential to bring the country together. Oh, so nice. Wow, Nikki Haley. Wow, would be great, right? But it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. He will not get his way. Now, I do want to, so there's a whole thing here that I want to connect to China and what we saw yesterday, but it's too complicated and it's going to take me a long time, and I'll save it for the next one. But just know that the Asian Saga, which is a series of books by a fellow named James Clavell, started with Shogun. From Shogun, it goes to Taipan, I think it's called. So Shogun, Taipan. Shogun is set in the beginning of the Shogun era in Japan. So when there was a type of civil war before the Meiji Restoration in the 1850s. So this is in the 1700s. And so it's about just a English pirate, I guess, or a Scottish fella who ends up there and meets a bunch of people, gets involved in the war. And it's a way to understand how the shogunate was created and where it came from. That moves in timeline. Their ancestors become the main protagonists in a story set at the creation of Hong Kong in the 1850s and the Opium Wars. And so they create Hong Kong, and they create what they call the Noble House, which is a really rich import-export. They did the opium. They were doing all kinds of stuff. So it goes from the 1700s to 1850. And then it jumps forward a little bit to the Meiji Restoration. It goes back to Japan for a story called Gaijin about the children of the Storian Noble House. Now they're doing more trade, but now it's open and the Americans are involved. It jumps from Gaijin all the way to World War II and a book called The Rat King, which is set in the airport, or where it is an airport now, but it's set where the airport is in Singapore now, but that used to be a prison in World War II. It was a Japanese prison. So the next one is set in a Japanese prison. Again, the same families, the same people, the descendants. Then it skips to the 1960s in Hong Kong again, and the stock market, and it's all about intrigue, and Russia is now in Soviet Union, and the People's Bank of China is a big thing. The whole thing is set in what we would recognize as a modern stock market. And it's an amazing story. Just, the two Hong Kong ones are my favorite and of the series. Each of these books are huge, by the way. Anyway, the point is, it all ends in 1979 in Iran. And it's called Whirlwind. And it's all about Ayatollah Khomeini coming into power, the Chinese energy implications, and the Western implications for Chinese energy, and all of this stuff. So everything we saw with Xi yesterday can actually be explained through Iran, the LNG, and what we saw with what Mike Benz has been talking about for a while. So The point is, everything that went on over there, we're going to talk about it another time when I have a better framework to share it. I wanted to share it with this whole distorted political scene in America, opening up the avenues for new things. We can see it that way. What's going on? Russia, for example, just had its GDP outlook doubled. They're selling so much energy. Moody's, of course, with the American rating, saying what is happening, right? Countries are trying to get out. Countries are trying to not be holding the bag for what America is doing. America has unfrozen $10 billion more for Iran. Remember the last time they unfroze $6 billion? It didn't take long for that money to get activated, and it wasn't fun for Israel, that's for sure. But again, you got to follow the money, right? Remember, America is funding both sides, okay? Both. That's why what happens in America matters. And that's why we got to talk about this recalibration, right? We've been funding both sides of this stuff for a long time. And if we can't follow the money to find out why we're funding both sides, what we get out of it, what's going on here, the bin Laden stuff ends up making sense. But we got to get rid of the bin Laden logic. The bin Laden logic only applies if you can't follow the money. Right? If you can't follow the money, I get why bin Laden would think that way. Fuck it, he says, right? Fuck it. If Americans don't want to understand what's paying for it, but it's the absolute wrong thing to do. We are not responsible for what the tax system does or the government just by voting for it. We've been so hypnotized that you can't even make people responsible for these opinions. It's not possible, right? Now, I 100% believe in personal responsibility, but in these instances where you're actually getting root key access to your brain because you don't understand the fiction of money, and you don't understand the effect it has on your incentives, well, I mean, we're not in a world where people understand this enough yet to be totally responsible for these opinions. Therefore, what we're saying about the Hamas situation, look, it's better to think of bin Laden and the people in Gaza now as people who have a sickness. It's a virus they have in their brain. It can be spread too. That's why you don't want them around you, right? You can actually catch it from them. If you spend too much time there, right? And listening to this logic, because the logic can make sense, right? But logic is not the field we're in here. We're in the field of manipulation, persuasion, hypnotism, and that's how this stuff works. So the point is, the realignment happening in America is a lot better for us to be able to understand the money, the incentives, and we'll actually arrive at a point where we can maybe solve this stuff in the short term and be able to have an opinion about Israel and Gaza that isn't just about the moral extremes and all that. Again, I love Israel. Love it. I wouldn't want to live in a world where Israel can't exist. I wouldn't want to live in that world. Right? I want Israel to perpetuate forever, and I'm a fan of it. Right? And I love it. But the payments for what it is today have to be questioned. The opinions about supporting it, the way we've supported it, have to be questioned. Now, I don't ever want to say bin Laden was right. He is not right. He was 100% wrong. Just like we're 100% wrong making every single Gaza person guilty for what they did. Now, it doesn't mean I have an answer to how to help them. I think that what's going on in Canada, for example, if you heard Trudeau yesterday, Trudeau going on and on and on and on about a ceasefire and all innocent people and this and that, I think he's just saying they're coming to Canada. I think he's just setting it up so that he can say, oh, we need the Gaza refugees. I don't want them here at all. Like, if they come to Canada, if they come to Montreal, I can't live in Montreal anymore. I'm not rolling the fucking dice with people with mind viruses around me that are willing to kill people. I mean, we've already got a synagogue shot up here in Montreal, right? I'm not coming. I'm done with cities if this happens. I'm done, all right? And I love Montreal. I don't want to have to go, right? I don't want to have to, but I can't take the risk if that's what happens. So I don't want anyone in Gaza dying either, right? That's for sure. But this idea of you're responsible for the group of people and therefore the punishment is collective and all of that, I'm not down with that at all. And by being able to follow the money, we're going to be able to understand this stuff a little better and protect ourselves from this form of hypnotism a little better, I think. So there you go. All right. All right. Sorry, guys. I don't normally like talking about this stupid subject, but Gad Sad seems to have a parasitic mind virus taking over him right now. I mean, I think he needs. I think he needs a little bit of Bitcoin in his life. I think he's become depressed about what can happen here. Right? That's just me. We'll see. There are only 3 to 4 brick and mortar retailers that accept. In addition, we're talking about Addis Ababa's Bitcoin penetration. By the way, I don't know if you guys know this, but in Israel, in Jerusalem, we're talking about all this stuff, right? You got the Dome of the Rock, you got the Saint Sepulchre, where the Orthodox and Catholics share the church. You got the Wall, the Wailing Wall, but there is one more church there that a lot of people forget about, and it's one of the churches in the holiest possible real estate you can get on earth, and it's the Ethiopian Christian Church. It's an amazing place. I've been there. Ethiopians run it, and they stay there. Very neat, very neat. I got to visit. I've not been to Ethiopia yet. Nice. I spent many years in San Jose. I did have an Ethiopian neighbor growing up. If you remember, in the 80s, Ethiopia had its terrible famine. And so an Ethiopian girl came and lived in my little town in Quebec, and she was great. She only stayed a couple years, though. How many chairs do you use? Are you all in on the chair? Fuck chairs has been my MO. And carving wooden stools. And Bitcoin. Very cool. WTF? He cool with war crimes? I don't know what you're talking about. That's BS regarding Turks have been equally evil against Armenians, yet we don't have genocidal urges. You haven't been brainwashed enough, John. That's all it is. That's all it is. Adams upset the regime. Yeah. Fiat money invented Israel. Probably. Yeah. Probably, Felipe. Probably. Facts when we talk about the Jews. Ben Shapiro, probably. Yeah. Heard that 95% of Israel got the iron. Yeah, look, they're not well treated by their own government either, guys. Right? There's not going to be any children left in Gaza. No, there aren't. Yeah, there aren't, John. Yeah, I'm aware of that. I'm not denying that. It's simple. What drives you also drives an incentive, disincentive. Prohibition is less powerful. Yeah. We love Japanese stuff. Nihon. Nikki H went full psycho mom tyrant with the internet. It makes me question if women should be. A lot of people are questioning that. I've questioned it for a long time. Annexed, yeah. My Gazprom stocks are still locked in Germany. Yeah. Funding both. Yeah, this is what I mean, right? Funding both sides. It's been like this for a long time. Eye for an eye, and the whole world eventually goes blind. Jevi says Israel doesn't continue to exist without transfer. I don't know if that's true. I think, see, this is exactly the question that I think we need to litigate in public. What's their credit rating? Why can't they borrow money? Why? Like, I'm wondering, why can't they borrow money? Like, why does America have to go into it? No, they have not been friendly. Well, Bibi has been. Bibi has come out and said he thinks Bitcoin will take over. But yeah, I don't trust their government. But again, what I do like about the Israeli government is that there are 30 parties. It looks like chaos entirely, which is what you want. You want chaos when it comes to government, right? It's better than efficiency. Nazis are efficient government. You want the opposite of that, right? You don't want, for example, the American government might look inefficient, but you're looking in the wrong places, right? They're efficient in hiding Hunter Biden's laptop in Joe Biden's daughter's diary. Like, they're good at that stuff, and that's what they want to be good at. So that's what's going on. But in the case of Israel, 30 parties. It's all these coalitions. It's always gridlock. It's always seized. When I spend time in the Knesset, that's what you realize. All the work happens in the cafeteria. Everyone's in the cafeteria all the time for all the parties. They all sit together. There's too many parties, so no one sits like in their gang, right? It's not 2 gangs, it's 30 gangs. So there'll be like a Muslim congressman there, and I guess they call them members of parliament or members of the Knesset or whatever. But I met all kinds of them when I was there, right? And there are all kinds. There are literally all kinds. And that's all I want for America. That's it. I just want what Israel has. I want a bunch of opinions. Better people are in their parliament. Like, the IQ of their average Knesset member is probably much higher than in America. And what they do is, so they have a system where if your party gets X amount of the popular vote, you get X amount of the seats in the Knesset. So, and you can actually rank them. So you don't have to get a dud in a shitty county because you won that shitty county. If you get 10% of the vote, you just choose, and if that 10% say gives you 10 members of parliament, well, you just pick your 10 best, right? So their IQ for participation is much higher. Which leads to more gridlock and more trouble and all that stuff, which you kind of like, right? You kind of like it. That's good, right? So now, I don't know if Israel would not be okay if they would survive without payments. I mean, when I think of the transfer payments, right? America gives Israel $5 billion in military spending every year or something like that, right? Well, do they give Israel $5 billion, or do they give Israel $5 billion to buy American stuff, which is really just America giving money that goes back to themselves? It looks like it's U.S. taxpayer money washing and laundering by the military-industrial complex. That's why the follow the money thing is important. How much do they really need to survive? I would like to see the number, right? Do they need all these weapons? Probably. Can they pay for them? Probably. Probably. I don't know. I just don't know. No one knows. Does anyone even looking? Have they ever hired like actuaries and budget people? I don't know. I would like to know. Any money that we're talking about giving Israel in the future on a Bitcoin standard would come with these implications and these considerations. But indeed, it looks sketchy to the rest of the world that we don't know any of these things, and then America will just give all their money to Israel all the time, right? That's a problem. You got to be able to talk about it. And it's especially a problem when the ADL and these other folks are going around saying that white Christian Americans are the problem. That just serves American political interests. That's getting involved in the American division brainwashing, which is not where you want to be, right? And where we're not going to be for much longer. So that's the good news. The funding of the both sides thing is going to become a lot more transparent and obvious. And so all this to say, this Middle East thing already is destroying the Democrat Party. Look at Eric Adams. Look at all of these coalitions falling apart. Indeed, they are out of their minds to say, oh, look at Elon Musk, right, criticizing the ADL. He's an anti-Semite, right? He's the worst. Funny enough, Candace Owens in that Tucker Carlson interview cites Elon Musk as like one of the great heroes of all time, much more than Ben Shapiro. Now, I love Ben Shapiro, well, he's a bit of a drug dealer in the sense that he's a dopamine distributor and he knows how to push outrage, and that's the old world of stuff. And so all of that, but still, there are things in this conversation that I don't think, what's her name? Candace Owens is right about, right? I'm pretty sure she still has some stuff to learn from Ben Shapiro. Here's another one, though. Great. Cernovich. He also just punched Ben in the face. It was pretty good. Did you see Ben on that BBC interview? He's not exactly used to being challenged, and he doesn't have a healthy emotional response when he is. Ever see clips of him debating adults? No, he screams at ugly kids who got diversity slots for college. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. I do think, he has a very similar background to me, law. I still look to him and I'm generally impressed. I don't consume a bunch of his content. He was not a Trump. I kind of abandoned Ben in the early Trump days because he wasn't into Trump, and that's all I was into the confirmation bias, and I just want to hear good stuff about pleasure principle about Trump. You know what I mean? There was enough negative stuff in 2016 that I was like, do I need to listen to someone fucking getting nuanced about Trump's opinions and how, Nikki Haley is his spirit animal? No, I don't need any of that in my life. So I already kind of written him off, but still, when we get into legal issues, I'll still listen to some of his content if it's about points of law, and I'll go, oh shit, this is one clear thinking son of a bitch. And in general, he is a good source for clean thinking, except on this issue. It looks like he can't seem to get it clear, or it's clear to him, but not to us, or whatever it is, right? We're not in agreement. So there you go. All right, team. I don't normally like talking about this Middle East issue, but it just seemed like all the questions were around it today, and all of the commentary was around it, and so that's what I got. But anyway, it's leading to a huge scrambling of minds in America, which is a good thing. We got to shake the box, right? Shaking the box left and right, I think, is going to settle on something that will be hugely beneficial to Bitcoiners, which is recalibrating things, not conservative, liberal, not right, left, of course, green and orange, dollars, and supporting the system, supporting the censorship, supporting obfuscating, follow the money, so you don't actually know what's going on, so that you're prone to being hypnotized, prone to being manipulated, versus the warts and all truth about the world and being able to follow the money wherever it leads you, right? It's not just going to be fun and games, right? Wherever it leads us. But that's what it comes down to. Right? It's a realignment of politics, I think, for the best. So there you go. All right, team. That's all I got. That's all I got for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it didn't bore you. Hope you come back tomorrow for a little more chatting about Bitcoin. And hopefully we don't got to talk about Israel again too much. All right.